Hey everybody, Ben here from DMC Films and Cinderblock Studios, and it's everything you need to know about drawing inks in less than 6 minutes. So what is ink really? Inks are one of the world's oldest drawing media, being traced back to 23rd century BC China. The basic composition of ink is dye and water, although some older ink recipes use gum arabic or animal glue as a binder. One of the most common types of ink is carbon ink. Carbon-based inks were made with powdered carbon in the old days, however most modern variations use carbon nanotubes to increase both the durability of the ink and its light fastness over time. Another common historical ink was iron gall ink. Iron gall ink was first used in the 5th century and continued its use all the way up to the 20th century. The name iron gall comes from the two main ingredients, iron filings and oak galls, which were these big sort of round growths on oak trees. Most people are going to know iron gall ink because of its historical significance in writing and calligraphy, specifically in old documents around the 1700s, something like the signing of the Declaration of Independence. However, because this type of ink is made with iron filings, those iron filings would rust over time and eat away at the paper, obviously making a pretty undesirable solution for artists. Unless, of course, you're actually going for that look. These days, though, drawing inks are two main types, dye-based inks and pigment-based inks. Dye-based inks, like this bottle of Higgins Black Magic India ink, usually have a really great, strong, inherent color. However, dye-based inks are often a little more transparent and tend to fade over time. Pigment-based inks, like this Liquitex Professional, won't fade over time. They're great for people who are more painter-oriented like I am. The inks also have better color, hue, and saturation, however they're also very opaque, so if you're more drawing-oriented, you may not find them ideal. They're also a little bit more difficult to use with a dip pen or an airbrush. So that's what inks are made of, but in terms of drawing, there are four main types that ink can be used as a vehicle or within a vehicle itself. So the first type of ink vehicle we have are pens. The original ballpoint pen was invented in the 1800s and was designed to be a more easily accessible pen rather than the standard fountain pen of the time, and it was. In Japan in the 60s, the rollerball pen, my favorite, was invented and was designed to be a better pen that's less stress on the hand, the ink doesn't fade over time, and it's also available in more colors. However, the low viscosity of the ink causes a little bit of bleeding and blotching, and if you're not used to that, you may not like it. And the final type of pen I want to talk about are drawing pens, or felt tip pens. Something like a Prismacolor pen, a Micron pen, or even a Sharpie. Felt tip pens are designed to be a sort of nice balance point between a traditional ballpoint and a rollerball pen. In addition to pens, inks can also come in jars, like our India ink or acrylic ink as we discussed before. Another form of ink would be sumi or block ink. Most people are going to know sumi ink as it's used in traditional Chinese and Japanese art. Sumi is a brick of ink or a stick that is dissolved in water similar to watercolors. And finally, we also have printmaking ink. Most modern formulations of printmaking ink you're probably going to find in your home printer, something like an inkjet or a laserjet. However, there also are thicker and thinner viscosities used for different types of projects. A thicker viscosity ink would be used in something like a linoleum block print, while a thinner printmaking ink would be used in like a copper or brass etching. Alright, we've talked about what ink is and what forms it takes. Let's talk about how we use it. When people do some sort of ink drawing, it's either a sketch or an illustration. Ink has a really appealing look, often because it creates a really great high contrast on a page. There's also line work for any sort of traditional doodling, cartooning, or even more realistic sort of political comics. And there's also more painterly methods that you can use with ink, something like what Mary Doodles does over on her channel. So then when it comes to actually working on your project and you think, okay, maybe I'm not going to use a pen, so what am I going to use? Well, then you might be thinking something like a feather, dip pen, brush, dropper, or even like a block print itself. So then finally, when it comes to the paper or surface you're working on, well, what's one of the cool things about pen is there aren't a lot of limitations. Any absorbent paper or board surface can be used. But the three most common surfaces for a finished ink drawing are standard drawing paper, bristle paper, or illustration board. Now we've covered a lot of stuff here today, so let's take a quick review. Historically, inks have been used all over the world in both Eastern and Western cultures. Modern ink formulations, both pigment and dye-based, should be researched before you figure out which one's for you. Most ink comes in 4 different types: pens, thick, heavy, viscous forms of block printing ink, sumi ink, which is little blocks of sort of watercolor type ink, and India ink in little jars. Inks are used to create anything from detailed illustrations to simple cartoons. And whether you're using a regular pen, a dip pen, a felt tip marker, a brush, whatever you want to put that ink on your page with, you can use anything from drawing paper to bristle paper and even illustration board. So the bottom line is, inks create a great, appealing look with strong contrast, and like I've said in a lot of my live shows before, it actually teaches you to make fewer mistakes. However, because ink is a permanent medium, and if you're using a liquid ink, it could be a little bit of a mess, it could be less than ideal to work with. Especially if you're somebody who thinks it's going to really smudge and smear, especially if you're dragging your hand across the paper. So if you're looking for a nice cheap investment and great drawing media to use, you should try inks. In addition to all the traditional options with inks, you can actually scan your ink drawings and color them digitally. And the best thing about working with them is that whether you choose to use pens or liquid ink or even something more like a computer digital ink, the skills you use will translate between them. So that's everything you need to know about drawing inks. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more art videos, and this has been from DMC Films and Cinderblock Studios. See you guys next time. Thick, heavy, viscous, not viscous. It's not a frickin' word.